Well, I'm going to do a hard switch here because one of the things that I find pretty interesting about you, Steve, is, and I'm going to unveil this to everybody else here. It is your background and how you got to being a lawyer. And one of the things that we really care about here is mindset and how you go through this. So I want to know. So for everybody listening, Steve was a Division I football player. You played for the U, right? As a defensive end?
For a time, I practiced with the team. I played at Wyoming.
Oh, you played at Wyoming?
Before that, yeah.
Interesting.
For 1 year, yeah.
Okay, and then you were actually a teacher before you became a lawyer.
I was a public school teacher. For a time, I taught secondary English for 6 years, and then I at the community college level for like 1 year.
Interesting.
And I was a teaching assistant at Utah State while I was doing a master's degree in English many years ago.
Okay, and then the third thing I kind of want to bring up, and I've got a point to this, so stay with me, all right? And then you also are very involved with animals and livestock and whatnot. You actually are a cowboy in a sense. That you tell us just a little bit about the horseshoeing.
Yeah, well, there was, as a boy growing up, my maternal grandfather especially, he was from a working farm, working ranch, and he left the ranch and he became a lawyer. But so although he left the farm, I think the farm never left him, and so I was exposed to that, and I admired him a great deal, and I learned about horses. I learned to shoe horses, and there was a day where I wanted to return to school and didn't have the ability to finance it, so I thought, well, how will I do this? And the solution I came up with is to shoe horses as a business. And I didn't realize at first how big the gap was between me and the real pros. But I closed the gap when my economic survival depended upon it for a time. That's really how I financed law school. So there was, in my 30s, which was the 1990s, that's getting to be, people my age think about the 90s and they think, oh man, that was a long time ago. That was 20 years ago, but it's actually 30.
Trust me, I'm aware.
It's funnier if you're an old guy like me.
I'm laughing.
Yeah. But
these kids were born then.
Yeah.
But I supported myself by being the term is a farrier. It's an antiquated term, Farrier. Farrier, a shoer of horses, a blacksmith specifically, who is also a shoer of horses, and that's how I supported myself in my 30s. That's how I financed law school.
Did you have the truck and the whole thing, because I've seen those farrier trucks, and they have, you got the iron on the back, all the stuff to shape the shoes, and it's a big process. There's a lot involved in being a reasonable, competent farrier.
Yes, and an interesting aspect of that particular trade is that there is, as far as I'm aware at least, there's no state in the United States that issues a license for farriers. I think there are some states where you have to have a license to be a plater on a racetrack, on a state-owned racetrack. So the government is not regulating the industry.
It's the Wild West.
It's the Wild West as far as regulation, but the market regulates the industry to do well in the business of being a farrier. You have to have top drawer skills. It's I would recommend to somebody, if they consider being a farrier, if they didn't feel real passion for it, they should consider it a different trade, because you won't, I think, actually be able to do well unless you have real passion for it. It's like being a guitar player.
It's an artist.
In a sense.
I've known a farrier or two in my day, and in order to do it well, you have to. There's an eye for not laming the horse and doing it well, and doing it that they won't get thrown easily and all those things. That's impressive. Hats off to you.
Yeah, people do it on different levels, of course, and
sure.
I've heard people who are at the very top of the trade that are famous among other farriers say things like it's something that truly cannot be mastered. It's too difficult to truly be mastered. Well, having said that, mastery is relative, I think.
Sure.
But to gain a level of mastery where you would be like successful in the business of doing it, you'd have to be someone who's fairly obsessed with it.
How far down the obsession train did you get?
Oh, I'm fairly obsessed with it. I would describe my skills as well above average, good, maybe very good, but not outstanding. But I've really, in addition to like what else I've done since that time, I've really paid some dues in that business. I spent so much time like making horseshoes by hand that I threw away just for practice. It wouldn't make any sense to the casual observer. It's just something I just really wanted to do because it was in me.
Well, and you also, now this is kind of interesting, you also own these animals too, but you're more on the mules, right?
Yeah, I've owned horses in my life, which people have a hard time understanding. If you're a school teacher and you own a horse, how do you do that? Well, you shoe a lot of horses. That's one way. But yeah, now that I'm old and I don't bounce like I used to, I have some mules. I have some mules that I prefer. There was a day where people who had unruly horses would lend me their horse. They're hoping I would fix it for under the guise of doing me a favor. I was fixing their problems. But, I've known for some time that when I got to be a certain age that if I was, still climbing in the saddle, I'd probably just find myself a good mule, and that's what I've done.
Well,
that's
why
maybe
is
a
that?
topic for a different podcast, but, well, and now we're getting off in the cowboy weeds. Nothing I can say about this topic is. Let me say, one of the most annoying things about mule people, the horse people, is they won't shut up about their mules. That's the way it is.
I was gonna
You
say,
should meet guys that own Indian motorcycles.
Yeah,
They
right.
won't quit talking about it.
Right.
fuck up.
According to like what I've read, historians, anthropologists say somewhere around 5,000 years ago, people quit just eating horses that were in a domestic herd and started training them, using them for transportation. And what's really interesting, it's not very long after that we start seeing evidence of mules, which is a cross between a female horse and male donkey, Andalusian donkey specifically. They're large donkey. But so mules show up almost as soon as people are riding horses, and not being a professional anthropologist, one of my opinions is very interesting to me is that nothing shapes the military history of the world until the invention of the airplane more than the development of cavalry. So in other words, it seems to me that for 4,000 years, who ruled the world in terms of military might had a great deal to do with who had cavalry. In the British Empire, that is, the quintessential example of imperialism, I suppose. That is one aspect of British culture. The cavalry culture, like culture in the British military to this day is exemplary, to the world, if you would. But of course, it's not the automobile so much that displaces the importance of the horse and welfare as much as the airplane, in my opinion, because the airplane can do something that similar to the horse, in that it can go places where there are no roads, and that's really what the horse. Of course, like motorized vehicles are getting better all the time, but I would contend that they are still no match for a good horse, a good mule. But your question about the differences in mules. The folklore, the word on the street about mules is that they're smart, but they're also stubborn and mean, and not to me. But of course, I'm the guy that climbs under a live horse and like trims its feet with razor sharp tools and nails shoes on it, and being under a horse. So I'm probably not exemplary of how it would be for most people, but
Who's ornery here?
yeah, right. But mules, their brain is wired just a little different, and there's things that horses do better than mules. They're generally run faster than mules. They're definitely they're usually almost always lighter in the bridle, more responsive, more sensitive to cues from the bit or the reins or legs, you know. But mules' brains, when there's a crisis or there's a threat, okay, they don't spook as easily. Typically, they always think about where they're stepping before they step, even in the midst of a crisis, which would be a good thing, I think, for people to do too. When the heat is turned way up, do you react? Do you think about it before you make a move? Mules, they tend to do that, and they are very opinionated about people. If you have a group of mules and a group of people that are going to go ride these mules, the mules belong to an outfitter. There may be one person in that group for whatever reason. Maybe they're loud, maybe they gesticulate wildly, maybe they wear some funny smelling cheap aftershave. But it's not unusual that there's just a person in that group that the mules don't take to for whatever reason. But if you're going to ride through the mountains 30 miles by yourself, I would recommend that you take a good mule. And there's some great trail horses. I'm not taking that away, but what I would say to, maybe quarter horse people, for example, that got a quarter horse that's just a great trail horse, I say if you got a quarter horse that will walk as far and as fast with as much strength, endurance, and not spook easily like a mule, definitely don't sell him.
It's a rare thing.
Now we got from gun rights to mules.
That's how this goes.